Hey guys, Aldi Simone here again, here today with my personal friend and lawyer confidant, James Lax. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you
Uh,
for having.
no, not at all. I've been working with James for a number of years. He's been my go-to for over a decade. He's with Lax Kocovski Barristers and Solicitors on the Danforth. Most of you may have met him already through referral, and if you haven't, if you ever ask me for a lawyer, this is the gentleman you're going to meet. So James, thanks for your time today.
No problem.
Awesome. So James, I mean, we're operating from home. Thanks for putting on a jacket, as did I. You know, we won't discuss what's happening below the waist right now, but
Yeah.
but just wanted to take some time to provide a little bit of value to our clients and whoever's listening. Really, you know, I've leaned on you heavily over the years. So thanks for taking the time. And I guess the first thing, just for those that aren't familiar with the process, can you just give me a bit of background as to, I guess, a lawyer's role in the buying and selling process, just kind of at a high level?
Sure. So basically, once people have finalized their purchase agreement with you and have done their inspections and financing clause, that's when we typically will jump in and run with the file. Now, our involvement at the initial stage is simply just to get some additional client information, important facts such as whether they're first-time buyers or not, so they could take advantage of land transfer tax rebates, etc.
Okay.
The main aspect really after the information is gathered is for us to do title searches. It's done in the background. The clients aren't directly involved, but our role is to ensure that when the closing occurs, they're not taking a property with any liens or any title issues that they didn't know about. So that's what we essentially do in the background. If we identify an issue, we work it out with the other lawyers so that they have to remedy it or fix it by the time the closing occurs.
Mm-hmm.
The bulk of our involvement will be towards the end of the closing phase where, for example, about a week to 10 days before the actual closing date, we will start working on preparing the mortgage papers, assuming that they're getting a mortgage, communicating with the client to advise them of the follow-ups that they need to do, for example, things such as setting up home insurance and utilities. Once we have that all figured out, that's when we set up a client meeting. Now, non-COVID days, obviously all client meetings are in person.
Yeah.
We would meet to discuss everything, review the signed documentation, go over the closing process, and then of course, when we hit the final closing date, at that point, we just run with it on the day of, receiving the funds from the bank and obviously from the client, and close the deal and arrange for the keys. And that's essentially a very quick overview of the normal environment day-to-day scenario for customers.
Right.
These days.
Yeah, I was about to say, you touched on COVID, and the whole kind of idea behind this little mini series I'm putting together is, you know, kind of bringing people up to speed on how we're pivoting with the times, because being an essential service, you know, we need to ensure everyone's safety and efficiency along the way. So I wanted to get your kind of insight on how your business is pivoting and what you guys are doing to kind of provide during this time.
Sure. Well, one of the things that we have limitations on, unlike yourself, is we cannot accept DocuSign for signatures. So DocuSign is certainly a very convenient aspect for agents to deal with signing agreements, but customers have to understand that for lawyers, there's a higher standard where we technically will need individual signatures with ink on paper. Now, again, normally we would meet in person. Given the current COVID-19 situation, the Law Society and the government has provided a temporary exemption which allows us to virtually meet with clients similar to what we're doing right now, to meet in person over the internet via any particular app. There's no requirement for specific one. Reviewing the documents, reviewing the ID, and ultimately for me to witness that client sign in front of me virtually. Once that's completed, then what we would normally arrange to do is have a courier pick up an envelope with the entire signed documents, whether there's funds or not, we take it from there. In terms of funds, there's two options available. For those people that want to, they can arrange to send us a wire, so it's a virtual seamless flow. Or alternatively, some people will still go to their bank to get a bank draft and then include it in the package. And then we run from there. Now, on the key side, again, it varies, but you may certainly add to it. We typically would try to coordinate with agents for lock boxes so that they stay on the property and easier access, rather than keys, which would normally come to my office, and then we arrange to have the clients attend to pick it up, or we have to courier it out. In this case, with COVID-19, the less physical contact, the better for everybody's sake.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's excellent. That's an eye opener. So there will be a little bit of manual contact, but being done at a very discreet level and very safe process, which is good. That's
Yeah,
good to.
we have to value everyone's health, including our own and our staff, and obviously our customers. So the minimizing of contact is essential during these times.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. That's great. That's good to hear. Another thing that's kind of been buzzing with me a bit when we talk about the COVID-19 and real estate, the a lot of headlines around, the premier telling people not to worry about their rent, or we're hearing a lot about landlords not kind of giving any grace periods or whatnot. Like, where does the law stand, so to speak? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but like, what do tenants need to know from a residential side, and landlords as well? Like, what do we have to keep in mind when we kind of go down that road?
Well, keep in mind, first of all, that's an evolving state. It changes day to day, week to week. If
Mm,
we could divide that question up to residential and commercial, although on the
sure.
commercial side, you may not have as many clients dealing with that. On the residential side, as you know, as Premier Ford has stated, basically, if you don't have to, don't pay your rent. That's questionable because essentially what's happening in the market right now is that they have shut down the landlord and tenant board so that there are no proceedings allowed. What does that mean in essence? No eviction proceedings can take place. So everyone who doesn't pay rent cannot be evicted during this COVID-19 scenario. Now, what people have to keep in mind is that when they're talking about don't pay rent, this is not a rent forgiveness scenario. At most, this is a deferral. So people have to understand that if you can't pay, that's one thing. But if you can pay and you don't, either way, those are going to continue to be owed at some point. So you cannot avoid having to pay your rent just because of the COVID-19. There may be some programs in the works about compensating landlords so that they can take less rent or work it out. That's still going on. But as far as I'm aware, as of today's date, nothing has been finalized with any specific details. So again, in parallels to the commercial side, programs are there to try and help, potentially in the works. But as it stands today, if you are a tenant, you don't have to pay the rent. You're not going to get evicted for sure, but that rent will accrue, which means you're going to have to pay it later on top of your normal rent when this settles. So again, be careful in how you manage your money.
Right. And I guess we don't know for sure if that's going to lead to kind of additional months at the end of the term or like a lump sum payment. Like, that's still in the air, or case by case.
I think so, because I haven't read anything specific about it. Really is going to come down to government incentives to landlords,
Hmm.
because essentially the way I understand it right now, and it's not technically correct, that the the CERB, as I call it, or CURB, that people apply for up to get the 2,000 a month. By the way, one point people don't get, a lot of them think of it as a grant. I'm getting 2,000 a month. That is simply an income replacement at this point, which means you still have to set aside on average 20% for taxes, which you will owe for 2020. So keeping that in mind, roughly speaking, you would have about $1,600 to spend. I think the government's initial thought when they set that up was that'll help towards rent,
Okay.
amongst other expenses. Now, whether people choose to allocate that, that's a different story.
Sure.
But other than that, I don't think there's, until they come up with a program that makes it palatable for a landlord to reduce, or then and they can forgive rent, that's fine.
Yeah.
But as it stands today, I'm not aware of it.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
on the commercial side, I know it's slightly different. The law is completely different. You don't need the landlord and tenant board to evict. It's a commercial contract. So if you're a small business owner with a store and the landlord is not cooperative, and you haven't paid your rent and you're behind 15 days or more, they can lock you out, even if it's not, quote, fair or
Yeah.
good optics. A landlord can do that if they wish. And
Well,
those are the,
we're seeing that quite a bit. I'm hearing every day. I see a new article about the number of small businesses that are facing the reaper, so to speak. So hopefully something will come into play soon, because
I was just reading, yeah, I was just reading in today's Toronto Star, there was discussion, I believe, in there about a program that would assist landlords who would reduce rent So they, in other words, they get some sort of compensation that allows them to trickle down to the tenant to help make things work. But again, I don't know the details. It's all like, again, this is all happening at super speed at a government level. Normally would take months or years to do. So we just sort of have to wait it out till we know the details.
Yeah, well, the goal of this series is actually, we'll re-engage in a couple of weeks and give a bit of an update if there's been anything,
Sure.
anything that's changed that's significant. So anyone that's listening, just be aware of the date stamp on this and look for a more recent video if these facts are a little out of line. So, that being a current trend in what we're seeing, you're hands-on seeing, the deals that are coming across the table and who's closing, what's closing, and I guess the impact that COVID's having on closings. Like, what can you tell us a little bit about people that are finding themselves in the position where they might have a transaction closing in the next 30 days or a few weeks, and things they should think about and things they need to consider?
Well, it's an interesting time, obviously. What I'm still dealing with is quite interesting. It's an active April for real estate. Now, keep in mind, as a real estate lawyer, I am actually busy closing deals that were booked anywhere from 30 to 60 days earlier. So a lot of the transactions I'm still working on are technically at the early stages of COVID-19, where there was no lockdown. People didn't think of it that way. So I'm still seeing active buyers and sellers. But what I'm also seeing on the side now are people who are taking advantage of the interest rates and are remortgaging their homes, even with significant penalties. Many of them have done the math and figure, I am still in the long run better off to exit my old mortgage and re-enter into a new one. For example, I have seen mortgages on the variable side that put people at 1.65% right now, which is insane, basically. Clearly things can change, but that's on the refinance side. On the purchase side, there's still opportunities out there. I mean, if people are comfortable buying new properties that maybe they can't visually see yet, there's still potential opportunities because a lot of the buyers that otherwise would be competitors are on the sidelines. So you do see some activity, perhaps not as active, obviously, historically, month by month comparison, but there's certainly opportunities out there to buy where you could put yourself in a position of being a buyer without having to get into a bidding war. So I've had some discussions with clients about those options because they clearly view it as an investment opportunity to get in there, and perhaps as well sellers who are selling under a distressed environment where they feel they need to sell because they bought something else or an estate sale, they'll perhaps take an offer that could be significantly below market if it's the right option for them.
Yeah, and I'm seeing more and more from a brokerage's initiative on the real estate brokerage side, that we're adding schedules to offers that are kind of, we have to be, our closing dates need to be as fluid as the news is with all these COVID updates, where I'm seeing like deals could be delayed due to COVID. They could be, pushed. Like, buyers need to kind of be prepared for the uncertainty that's ahead. Have you kind of come across anything like that?
Yes, and there's only so much, as lawyers, we're trained to think of every potential possibility and what could go wrong on a deal and try to cover that off. And I mean, you could take it to extremes. Right now, for example, I have not had any deals postponed due to COVID-19, but a classic example would be you have a seller and a seller gets diagnosed with it, as quarantined, a member of their family, and you can't get them to sign. What do you do? So clearly, these are considered legal written contracts. If you have a pre-existing agreement and it doesn't address it, and you all of a sudden as a buyer or a seller cannot sign or meet to do it, then in theory, you're in breach of the agreement and the whole deal could fall apart and could end up in lawsuits. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So you cannot protect deals that don't have it. All you can do is move forward with new deals, and as you say, have COVID-19 clauses in there. Things to think about whether you're a buyer or seller. Consider having a power of attorney in place, meaning if any of you perhaps get diagnosed or are stuck in quarantine and cannot sign and there's no way around it, have a power of attorney in place that could step into your shoes to help complete the transaction on your behalf, just as a thought.
That's a good idea, yeah.
Now, it's easier on a sale, clearly. On a purchase, you run into trouble because the banks will not necessarily agree to a power of attorney due to fraud purposes. But sometimes these things could be discussed in advance, and perhaps it could be pre-agreed to, going on that basis. One other thing I wanted to bring up, because I have had discussions, these are for buyers in today's market. Now, Obviously, it is a challenge both from a seller and a buyer to not want to meet in person, potentially expose either side to the COVID-19 virus. So how do you go about buying or putting an offer in a place that you can't physically see or go to? So those are some of the interesting challenges. Again, obviously, it would be helpful if sellers would have a pre-inspection or an home inspection report available, so that could be taken off the table. That would just mean one potential visit, get it out of the way. Beyond that, what do? Well, you could get creative with videos. You could do the 360 video. And again, it's a comfort and risk level for a buyer, what they're willing to accept. My suggestion, which has been bantied about, and I haven't seen it in an agreement yet, but it's coming, would be to have a clause in an agreement that says, look, we've agreed on everything else. I'm agreeing to buy your house or your condo. I've agreed to pay this price, the deposit, the closing, everything's fundamentally agreed. But I want a condition that allows me a satisfactory site visit, one site visit, and I will go. And you could set parameters under COVID rules. For example, all parties have to wear masks and gloves. Hand sanitizer has to be available. You can limit the term of the meeting or the visit to 30 minutes if that's a magic number. They have to use best efforts not to touch things. So don't start touching handles if you don't have to, touching any, furniture. Keep it simple. But the idea is that you get to physically attend at the unit or the property, see for yourself, and then decide if you like it. If you don't like it, it's too small, or I didn't know there was a bulkhead, it bothers me, you cancel the deal, you get your deposit back, that's it. But at least it allows for a controlled environment where the seller can either be there if they wish or not, where you're also running into issues. And I'm going to drag that issue into the next, is tenants. So you want to sell a home or a condo and you have tenants. Tenants are scared. They don't want to cooperate if they don't have to and put themselves at risk. So again, you can't force a tenant under the current scenario to allow the home to be shown if they don't want to. So it's always best to try and provide a cooperative solution where you say, we're not going to have showings. We're not going to have an open house. What we're going to do is make it conditional. Only one buyer comes in, and that's it. And inevitably, there's usually some common ground, but that's how I would suggest things happen.
No, it makes perfect sense, and I'm actually seeing it more and more on the listing side that, no visitations allowed until there's a conditional deal in place. I haven't transacted one of those yet, but as long as things are worded properly, which is where a realtor and a buyer would lean on a lawyer like yourself to kind of make sure the wording covers us to all degrees. I think that's an excellent idea, and I'm going to be sure to bring that into play next opportunity for sure.
Great.
Anything else that we're missing on here? I really appreciate your time. It's been super insightful.
I can't really think of much else except that, my view on where we're at today versus where we may be at in the fall. There's a lot of, challenges in trying to forecast the future. COVID-19 could linger, it could be a second wave, we don't know. But assuming things are moving in the right direction, what you're seeing statistically in the newspaper right now is essentially a slowdown. And it's resulting from the fact that just there's very little product, very little buyers willing to get out there except the ones that have to. So you're seeing a slowdown. Now, does that mean for people that are looking at the market that, oh boy, I guess this might be the tip of the iceberg and the real estate market's going to continue to suffer and go down? I would disagree. Soon as the issue of COVID-19 is resolved, I am forecasting whatever date or time of the year that this was going to be essentially what I call a V recovery, which means we're on the downward slope of the V right now. Transactions are down, prices are dropping. As soon as they get this under control and people get a sense of normalcy, that V is going to slide right back up and you're going to end up with an extreme over market reaction. And what I mean is more people in the market from the pent-up demand, desperate buyers wanting to take advantage of the low interest rates before they change again, and it's going to be an extreme market. So again, it depends on buyers how they want to view things. If you want to play it safe and wait, you jump in when everything's clear. That's one aspect. If you're more of an aggressive investor looking to buy, this may be a better time to take advantage. One other thing I did want to raise, I'm not a mortgage broker, so I can't confirm, but you may want to double check this on your end. Mm-hmm. My understanding is for those people that have already committed to buying a home or a property and have since lost their job due to a temporary layoff for COVID-19, my understanding is that the banks are still allowing the mortgages to go through. So they're not pulling mortgages to put people in jeopardy by saying, I understand you lost your job because of COVID-19, your mortgage is canceled, too bad, see you later. They're allowing people to close, and then I guess eventually they'd have to deal with the mortgage deferral aspect.
Right.
The other question too, to be careful for those individuals, anyone who has a mortgage and is exercising the right of a deferral, they have to contact their bank and make 100% sure that it will not affect their credit rating. The initial thought going in was that Equifax was noting it as non-payments, in which case your credit rating could take a hit. The banks have since said it's not our intention for it to affect the credit rating, but you better get some assurances from them in writing so you don't jeopardize your credit rating. And again, people should be aware, these are deferrals. These are not forgiveness, which means that if you don't make your mortgage payment, say for the next 2 or 3 months, it'll get tacked into your principal repayment down the line. So it just, instead of your mortgage going down, it'll have jumped up equivalent to 3 months in that example. So just keep that.
Amazing, James. I really appreciate it. Awesome insight for everyone that's going to be listening and watching. Again, guys, James Locks, someone I hold dear to me in my practice and my clients. James, thank you for your time today.
My pleasure.
Stay safe, and we'll be in touch in a couple of weeks. Thanks, James.
You too. Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.